Welcome, everyone. Got lots of people coming in the virtual door, and we will get started in just a minute. All right, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon on this lovely spring day, spending part of your Wednesday afternoon with us. Welcome to ANJAC's 2023 Fundamentals for Effective Environmental Commissions. And today we are speaking about NRIs and ERIs, natural resource inventories and environmental resource inventories. I want to thank my colleagues for being here with us. We have Elizabeth Ritter, Sheila Baker-Grajal, Cheryl Reardon, and Nandini Checco. And we have wonderful speakers here with us, Cynthia Mellon from Newark's Environmental Commission, and Debbie Kratzer, ERI and NRI guru of all time. So we're looking forward to hearing from them today. Before we begin, we want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and we will be sending out links to all of our recordings throughout the week. We will send them out together next week once we have the full suite. If you have questions for us or our presenters during the presentation, please use the Q&A function. That's the best way for us to keep track of the questions and make sure that we've answered them for you. If we don't get to your question, or if you have something more meaty that you would like to discuss with us, or you would like to brainstorm on some strategy about how to approach an issue in your municipality, please email us at info@anjac.org, and we will make certain to have the appropriate staff member who can best answer your question get back to you. That's info@anjac.org. And I would like to draw attention to updates to ANJAC's mission that our Board of Trustees made just last fall. ANJAC's mission language has been updated to reflect our commitment to ensuring equitable and healthy communities and to approaching our mission by engaging in diverse and inclusive practices through all of the work that we do. As always, our priority is to serve you as volunteer municipal officials, as environmental commissioners who are advising your land use boards, your elected officials, doing community organizing, and really working to protect natural resources and make good decisions for your healthy community. In addition to providing resources and responding to your assistance requests, we have several priority issues that we are advancing in a proactive manner. And we see these issues as interlinked with one another. They include combating the climate crisis, which of course means reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also becoming more resilient to the impacts of the crisis that we cannot stop. It means advancing environmental justice and looking to create a more equitable and just New Jersey through our local practices of zoning, open space planning, land use practices, as well as working at the state level and putting forward the voices, lifting the voices of the community advocates and environmental justice advocates who are working on this issue day in and day out. We're also working, as I'm sure you know, to end plastic pollution. And so we have the strongest Plastic Pollution Reduction Act in the country, and we are thrilled with that, but we are not done yet. There are several bills that are working their way through the legislature to address microplastics. We're working with environmental justice leaders to ensure that we don't have pyrolysis or incineration of plastics that would impact the air quality even more so than it is impacted in their communities. So we invite you to continue to attend the webinars and work with us on these priority issues, as well as reach out to us on the issues that are most important to you in your community. This week is all about spring training. So it's the first week of spring. And we are here to provide resources for our newly minted environmental commissioners, as well as those who are more seasoned. So we've got a variety of programming happening for you this week. We will send out the links after the fact. And we also invite you to join us in person on April 1st at the Fort Monmouth Recreation Center. We will have some breakfast type snacks for you there, and we will be talking about advanced strategies for EC networking in your communities. It's been far and few between that we've had the opportunity to see your faces, so we hope that you will join us in person on April 1st. We're also celebrating Women's History Month. It's a very busy month for us here at ANJAC, and we want to honor and recognize the women who founded ANJAC and who are our very early leaders. We have a special memorial fund in name of Candace McKee Ashman, who I know was a mentor to myself and very, very many of us. And so we ask that if you are able to consider making a donation to ANJAC, and if you would like, you can restrict that donation to the Candace McKee Ashman Memorial Fund by indicating so in your donation. Those funds go to support our open space stewardship grants that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. And one additional item, if your EC has not yet renewed your membership for this year, we ask that you cajole, invite, nudge your administrator and your clerk to renew your membership with ANJAC. With so, you'll get the ANJAC report. That's a quarterly magazine where we bring you in-depth issues about the success and lessons learned that ECs are having across the state. We tell you about our work in Trenton. And we also are able to bring you the webinars and workshops that we bring to you at no additional cost. So we ask that you encourage your municipality to renew their membership. A few final words, because our priority is serving you, and we're going to put this link in the chat, and you can also use the camera app on your phone to scan this QR code and then fill out the survey. Just take a few minutes. Our priority is serving you. We want to know what you need from us. So if you fill this out, we can better tailor our programming to meet your needs. And with that, as we transition into our programming today, I want to take just a moment to highlight that ANJAC's open space stewardship grants are now open. So we have a call for proposal. These funds are supported by the Candace McKee Ashman Fund. So if you are giving a donation to ANJAC and restricting it to that fund, know that it's going to support this good work throughout the state of New Jersey. So these are small grants that environmental commissions established by ordinance are able to apply for to do good work for open space in their towns. You can see there are some suggestions for projects here. This is by no means a limitation of the kinds of work that you could do in your community. This is our 10th year of offering these grants to environmental commissions, and there are enormous number of projects that have been done, from apiaries to community gardens, education programs, habitat restoration, trail restoration. It's a wonderful opportunity to get work done in your community, but to also bring value added to your governing body. It is a wonderful thing when an EC can come to an elected official and say, we've got money to bring to the community. It increases your awareness, increases your presence in the community. It increases your ability to create good relationships with your mayor when you do a ribbon cutting, and you can invite her or him to attend. And it is our great pleasure to bring these grants to you. If you go to anjac.org and our action alerts, you can find more information. You can also type in the search bar grants, and that will get you there. Or you can email info@anjac.org. Many of you have likely already received an email about this. So if you have any questions, please bring it forward to us. And keep in touch by all means. We know many of you know how to find us, but just in case you were wondering, info@anjac.org. You can find us on Facebook at ANJAC. You can find us on Instagram at ANJAC Posts. And you can go ahead and scan the QR code. That'll take you to our website where you can find lots of information. We are rapidly updating our website with more resources for you. So with that, I want to turn it over to Deanie Checco, who's going to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. And we're going to learn a lot about creating ERIs, NRIs, and what to do with them once we have them.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. Before we get started, I wanted to just drop in a poll question to you folks and find out where you are with your ERI. And the question is, does your town have an environmental resource inventory or a natural resource inventory? I just trying to get an understanding here. All right. A few more people are entering, and I think we are, what do you think, Liz? We can go ahead and share those results. So it looks like, which is pretty impressive, 56% of folks know that their town has an ERI and an NRI, 12% said no, and 32% of you said not sure. Okay, so we have one more poll question, which is about open space inventory. So we learned from Sheila's presentation yesterday, one of the main jobs of the Environment Commission is to have an open space inventory. So we had a poll question about that. Liz, if you can launch that, that'd be great. And the question is, does your town have an open space inventory that has been updated within the last 5 years? Oh. And a lot of people are not sure. That seems to be the dominant one. That's fine, no worries. And that's something you can look into when you get back. So yeah, 22% said yes, and 37% said no. So a lot of work there to be done. Thanks so much for taking those two polls. I wanted to introduce our next speaker, which is Debbie Kratzer. Debbie founded the Kratzer Environmental Services in 1996. She specializes in environmental resource inventories and biological inventories. In addition, Debbie is an environmental specialist at NJDEP, and she has chaired the Kingwood Township Environmental Commission since 2007. She has received a bachelor's degree from Drew University and is currently working on her master's degree at Montclair State University, so which is phenomenal. So she's definitely the expert on this. So take it away, Debbie. Thank you. Debbie, you're on mute.
I know, I had to find the mute button. After I shared my screen, it moved. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your introduction. So this, I just wanted to go over an outline of what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to go over what is an ERI and why should you have one, the process, some tools and data sources, and then the topics that would be in an ERI. So let's start out with the definition of environmental resource inventory. An ERI is a baseline documentation of natural resources. It's an objective listing rather than an interpretation or a recommendation. And we use the terms environmental resource inventory and natural resource inventory interchangeably. The goals of the ERI are basically to provide objective, reliable environmental data in one document, in one place, to enable municipal officials to make more informed decisions and to better protect the municipality's natural resources and the overall health and welfare of the community. Of course, the municipality might, adjust the goals, but that's the basic goals. So there are a number of ways you can use the ERI. Starting with the municipal land use law states that when a municipality has an ERI, the planning board and board of adjustment shall make development applications available to the Environmental Commission, and that enables them to review and comment on development applications. Another use is for sustainable Jersey points. Having an ERI is worth 20 points, And a lot of the information that's needed for a municipal water story would also be found in the ERI. So that would get you started on that action. As Deanie mentioned, I had mentioned that the Kingwood Township had used their ERI as a tool for fighting the Penn East pipeline. It wasn't the only tool that was successful in stopping the Penn East pipeline, but it was one of the first tools because we needed to know what resources were being impacted, such as how many acres of forest, how many wetlands were there, how many streams the proposed pipeline would have been crossing and impacting, and how many of those streams were Category 1 and would need extra protection, and the presence of rare and endangered species as well. So it was one of the tools and it was very useful for that. The ERI process usually goes as follows. First, the funding source is obtained, a request for proposals is written, bids are acquired, and a contract is awarded. Then the consultant and the EC develop the ERI. For example, the ERIs that I've written use about 100 GIS data layers and from several dozen sources to produce about 50 maps, and for a total of about 200 pages in length. I'll comment that it's possible for an EC to develop an ERI without a consultant, but most municipalities will not have a person with both the technical skills and the time to do so. So the next step would be that the planning board would adopt the ERI as part of the master plan, then use the ERI, because now you have it. You can use it for all sorts of things. And then the ERI is used to enable municipal officials to make more informed, science-based, and sustainable planning decisions. And I think it's also useful for educating the public as well. Eventually, at least some portions of the ERI need to be updated, and a good guideline is every 10 years at least. And then the process would start over. This portion of the process takes about 1 to 1.5 years. An ERI is usually initiated and overseen by the municipality's environmental commission. So before you even get started, I recommend that EC members read the ANJAC resource paper on ERIs. And if you are thinking of applying for Sustainable Jersey points, then also their document. They're very useful. Probably the most difficult hurdle is to obtain funding. Municipal funds might be used, for example, the EC budget or money set aside for master plan updates. Sustainable Jersey has grants that occasionally fund ERIs, and there may be other grant sources, and some of them are targeted for different regions. So depending on where you are, you might have access to different grant sources. When you're getting started, you will also need to consult with the appropriate municipal staff, for example, the financial officer and the clerk, for your specific procedures on accepting grant money, on how to do professional services contracts, and how to go out to bid. It seems that each municipality has their own procedures, their own forms, and also their rules change. So they're the experts on that aspect. And of course, ANJAC is a great resource for help as well. Before you write your request for proposals or your RFP, you want to designate a project leader or a project manager or contact. This is usually the EC chair or an EC member. You'll want to identify what resources are in your municipality, generally speaking. If you're updating, you'll want to identify what needs to be updated. Maybe the whole document doesn't need to be updated. Maybe you could just restrict to certain topics. Think about who is your audience. So for example, when I write ERIs, I try to make them accessible to the general public by providing key definitions and information about resources. But I also include details that readers with an environmental science background will find the most useful and interesting. And these are the ones that the more detailed information is what will be most useful when you are actually evaluating development proposals. You would begin to assemble references and resources to get the consultant started. For example, master plan, if you have an old ERI, as well as phone or email contacts where the consultant can contact you. Some further advice I have about writing the ERI, the RFP, be specific. So if you can find a ERI that you like as a guide, you can copy the table of contents and say, these are the topics that I want covered so that nothing gets left out. These are the things that I feel are important to be mapped. These are the deliverables. For example, do you want hard copies of the document? That will add to your cost, but some people still like to have a hard copy document, not just a digital. So you'll want to make that decision up front. You'll want to set forward what schedule you want. If you're getting a grant, this will probably be dictated by what the grant requires. And also like what qualifications you want your consultant to have. For example, you may want to require that they have already demonstrated that they have successfully completed an ERI. Is this the municipality's first ERI or is it an update? If the ERI was done, how old is it? In 2009, I wrote an article for the ANJAC report. So we compared when I had done an ERI for Kingwood Township in 2004. And so it was only 5 years old, but 33 GIS layers had been updated. And so the ERI needed to be updated to reflect that. And other information that needed to be updated were like natural heritage database for rare, endangered, and threatened species, several years of air, water, and toxics data, and recently preserved open space and farmland. For each resource, the ERI should include, of course, narrative text, maps to show the distribution of what the resources are. In some cases, graphs or tables may be good ways to communicate the information that you're trying to communicate, and the references of where that information came from. If you want to bring up this information in a meeting and they say, well, you know, you're saying that, but where do you get that information? Well, besides just saying that it's from your ERI, you can say, well, it's based on this because it's said right there. So you'll know where that information was from. So who does what? The Environmental Commission or the municipality might want to set up a subcommittee. Maybe the subcommittee would include someone from the planning board or the open space committee or something like that. But it's usually the Environmental Commission. And they guide the project and provide known information sources and reports, anything they might have, provide that to the consultant. They review draft documents and comment to make sure that that it answers your questions, that it fulfills what you need for your municipality. You want to designate a project lead or contact, and this would be the person that would be the contact between the municipal staff, elected officials, other boards, the public, because the public you might invite the public to, and you should invite the public to comment on the draft, and between, you know, all those people and the consultant, and keep the project on track. Of course, the municipal staff are important components of getting the ERI done. This, as I said previously, the financial officer and the clerk, they would be responsible for any bidding, financial, and contract tasks. And of course, the consultant is the one who creates the ERI. And let's not forget the role of the planning or land use board. One of the main goals of creating the ERI is for the planning board to adopt the ERI as part of the master plan, to use it in their own decision making. So you shouldn't wait until the ERI is final before getting their input. This includes the planning or land use board, the municipal elected officials, and municipal professionals. When you're asking for their input, give them enough time to review, because it may, you know, maybe a significant number of pages, but do set deadlines. And you have to find the right balance between giving people enough time but having deadlines that are reasonable so that you can meet your own deadlines for getting the project done. You want to plan to provide a presentation at a board meeting. The board will then hold a hearing for adoption of the ERI as part of the master plan. And as the municipal land use plan says, then the ordinances must be consistent with the master plan. And it also means that once you have an ERI adopted, that the EC should be provided with copies of any plans and proposals. So the next few slides, I've listed some sources of mapped information and mapping tools. Technology has made so much information available at our fingertips that it has gone to the point where it can be overwhelming. But the first and maybe one of the most prolific sources of data is New Jersey DEP's open data for GIS information. And then I've listed New Jersey DEP's Geological and Water Survey separately here because they do have their own website, but most, if not all, of their data is also on the DEP main GIS data site, but they also have reports that are maybe not mapped data, but are also important. Then NJGIN has New Jersey data that is not from DEP, such as elevation data and imagery, which means aerial photography. Also parcels, roads, as well as data from several counties, New Jersey Transit, and others. Some other important sources of map data include the NRCS, which has soils data, USGS, FEMA, which has floodplains, NOAA, Historic Preservation Office, and New Jersey Audubon, and there are others. Now for a few mapping tools. My favorite free tool is New Jersey GeoWeb. So this is the it's called a mapping application, and you can add much of the GIS data to this map to view. And it has excuse me, it has tutorials on the side here so you can learn how to use it. Another really useful tool for municipalities is NJ Map. This was developed by Rowan University, and it provides a municipally focused portal for mapped data. And for example, in environmental commission meetings, we sometimes just pull up this application on the screen and look for a parcel and add the wetlands, if to see something that we were talking about. So it can be very useful that way. Next, for municipalities in the Highlands Council has created a mapping application tool to create an interactive ERI for the municipalities that are in the Highlands. It also has a video overview so you can learn how to use it. And then if you want the actual data, that's there as well. New Jersey DEP also has dozens of story maps. These are mapping applications that combine mapped information with text and images to tell a story interactively. So, for example, a dashboard displays the most recent data for harmful algal blooms, and another one for parks. And the one change is for connecting habitats, so where infrastructure blocks the movement of wildlife. So there's a lot of information there, and some will be applicable to different municipalities. It would also be a great tool to make your ERI as a story map, but I'm not aware of any municipalities that have done that yet. They may be out there. The software that I use for creating an ERI is the ArcGIS software, and I've heard that you can get a non-commercial copy of this software if you're willing to put in the time of learning how to use it. It's not the easiest, but it is very powerful. I also wanted to mention the climate toolkit. So the municipal land use law was updated in 2021 to require that municipalities develop a climate vulnerability assessment as part of their land use element of their master plans. This would require build-out analysis, an evaluation of current and future threats and vulnerabilities, and strategies to reduce the risks of climate change related natural hazards. In my opinion, this would not really be part of your ERI, but it's related. So I think that you would want to keep your ERI as the factual information, and because this requirement talks about strategies, that's not really what an ERI is. But your ERI might include those factual things like temperature trends, drought, flooding, and sea level rise. And that data from NJ Adapt includes climate dashboard, flood mapper, and other climate information that was developed by Rutgers University. And these resources, depending on your municipality, some would be appropriate to add into the ERI. And since GIS data is integrally important in ERIs, it's necessary to document metadata. And now metadata is data about your data. So who created the data? Who was the author? When was it created? And information like that. So, so that when you are making a statement in front of the planning board or being asked for the source, you will be able to answer. So my next few slides will cover some important things to cover in your ERI. It doesn't have to be in the order that I put it. And if you have a preference, of course, just tell your consultant. And different municipalities may have a little different focus, but you'll want to cover all these topics. So you might want to start with describing changes in your municipality over time, such as aerial photos from different years and land use change. These topics are probably in your master plan already, but they may be out of date or not in the detail that you want. As I mentioned, climate and weather is something that should be covered in the ERI. It's actually a required part of ERIs if you're going to get Sustainable Jersey points. It's important to communicate why it matters and definitions such as the difference between climate and weather and climate trends and normal and extreme weather. And I've added a couple of sources there. This topic obviously can be controversial to some people, and it's important for this section as well as other sections for the ERI to be the factual information and not cover recommendations of what needs to be done. Air quality is important to cover as well. Several air pollutants are among the highest risks to human health and have socioeconomic and ecological impacts. Of course, air does not follow municipal boundaries, but it is important nonetheless. You want to describe infrastructure. Where does the municipal water come from? The drinking water? Is it safe? Is it sustainable? And then where does the wastewater go? Where does stormwater go? A lot of people don't know this answer for their municipality, and it's an important aspect for everyone to understand. You should describe the elevation and steep slopes in the municipality and communicate, why does topography even matter? Well, it matters because steep slopes present difficulties for construction and are vulnerable to erosion. The next is, why are soils important? Well, the soils influence the capacity of land to support plant life and human uses such as roads, buildings, and agriculture. And the soil characteristics that are especially important include farmland soils and septic limitations. If this is an ERI update, it's important to know that while the soils themselves may not have changed, they probably have not changed, the soils database may have been changed for new definitions, new interpretations of the soils data. And so this information might still need to be updated. Why is geology important? Well, the bedrock is the solid rock beneath the soil and the superficial rock, and it's the source of the soil, and it defines the aquifer. Does your municipality have rock outcrops? Well, that certainly will impact what's a bit available for development and limits development. Is there historic fill in the municipality? Historic fill is non-indigenous material brought in usually to increase the elevation of a site, for example, on roads. You need to provide information about groundwater resources, such as defining what is an aquifer and where do the residents get their potable water, and what is the quality. If the municipality relies on wells, then the Private Well Testing Act provides a lot of very useful information for the public. And if you have public water systems, the Water Watch provides information about the water quality from the public system. And then, of course, water quantity is very important. The New Jersey DEP has developed a water supply plan. The ERI must provide information about surface water resources, starting with what is a watershed and what is the water quality. For example, the surface water quality standards designate the uses of the water, such as, do you have category 1 streams or trout streams? And what does that even mean? Is the water impaired? That means, does it have pollution in it that exceeds the standards? And for what parameters? So what is causing the impairments in our streams? Are there floodplains in your municipality? And are there wetlands? This information is also would be input into the Sustainable Jersey Water Story Action. The ERI should describe any rare, threatened, and endangered plant and animal species that might be found in your municipality. Why do rare species even matter? You would also include descriptions and habitat requirements. These are probably things that your Environmental Commission wants to try to preserve. You can communicate that people can report sightings of wildlife using the new DEP app. They just released it just recently. They used to require a paper form to be filled out and mailed to them. And I think that this online way of reporting should be much easier for people to use. The landscape project is the mapping information for rare, threatened, and endangered animals. And the natural heritage grid map is for plants. And then there are natural heritage sites for exceptional habitats and other important things, such as important bird areas might exist in your municipality. So I know there's a lot of terms that like your ERI, by presenting all this information, would define and explain these different aspects of your municipality. You'll also include different types of anthropogenic impacts. One of these would be where there might be any discharges, such as New Jersey Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or as we like to abbreviate, NJPDES. What is the surface groundwater and drinking water quality? Do you have any known contaminated sites in your municipality? Is the groundwater contaminated in any locations in your municipality? And are there any fish consumption advisories? Because we want people to know whether the fish is safe to consume. An additional anthropogenic impact includes impervious surface. So why does impervious surface even matter? Well, areas of high proportion of impervious surface contribute greater non-point source pollution to our waterways. And that's a leading cause of water pollution. And watersheds with as little as 10% of impervious surface begin to show signs of degraded biological communities. So where does that non-point source pollution go? It goes into stormwater, and this increases erosion, flooding, and non-point source pollution. There are regulations that cover stormwater. There's another link that I've included here developed by Rutgers, a stormwater basin inventory. And most municipalities either have already completed or are in the process of completing an inventory of their stormwater infrastructure. It would also be great if your ERI would introduce the definitions of green infrastructure and the concept of green infrastructure. Most people used to want to get rid of water as quickly as possible. And now we understand that water, even stormwater, is a resource that we need to slow down and allow it to infiltrate into vegetation and soils. And green infrastructure is a way to do that with practices such as pervious paving, bioretention basins, rain gardens, vegetated swales, and cisterns. Invasive species should be addressed as well. Invasive species are one of the top environmental problems because they crowd out the native vegetation. And some of them cause, really impact the native ecosystems. So what invasives are of particular concern in your municipality? A couple of examples on this slide are Japanese barberry and spotted lanternflies. And they have really impacted forest health. Most ERIs also include open space, recreation, and farmland resources. These can also be addressed in a separate plan or a more detailed plan. But is that inventory up to date? So you should decide ahead of time whether the ERI is going to include this. As I said, most of them do, even when there is a separate open space plan. Are historic or archaeological resources important in your municipality? Do you already have an existing and up-to-date inventory? If you do, or if you have a large amount of cultural resources, that may be addressed in a separate plan, but it's often included in an ERI as a chapter of the ERI, but you would decide that in the beginning. Another option is, do you have something that's specific to your municipality? And the example I have here on this slide is that when I did the ERI for Tewksbury Township, they had a designation called scenic roads, and they wanted that included. Another example is in the ERI that I did for Highland Park, and they had done an inventory of their street trees. So that was included in their ERI. When I do an ERI, I also, kind of in the conclusion of the ERI, I do an overlay that includes a number of different environmentally critical areas, kind of overlaid. It makes kind of one, maybe it looks a little bit like a jumble because there's too many things on one map, but it also allows you to kind of see where are the areas of your municipality that are the most sensitive to any sort of development impacts. And also in a PDF, you can like click them on and off. Also, if you wanted to develop a mapped application, you could do something similar where you could turn on and off the different layers. I also have a note to remind people that the town scale maps that are included in the ERI don't take the place of site inspections. The data can be a little bit different when you're actually on the ground. A development application would always need to have in-person site inspection information for exact boundaries and locations of sensitive resources, as well as may find something that was never documented before. My last couple of slides are just to a couple of reminders that good communication, as in other aspects of our lives, good communication is very important. Perhaps the Environmental Commission is thinking, what's taking so long? But maybe the consultant is saying, why haven't I heard back from them on the comments that I requested? So just have good communication, and it's so much easier now that we can just have Zoom meetings, but in person is great too, to keep your project on track, providing drafts, providing comments on the drafts, and getting it all done in a timely manner. And my final thoughts, as well as getting sustainable Jersey points, why we're even doing an environmental resource inventory and caring about all these resources, I like to turn back to the definition of sustainable development. So sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I think that is a good guiding, provides us with the guidance and also the inspiration for what we do when we're on environmental commissions. And this is my website and contact information. So if anyone wants to contact me, it's kratzer@gmail.com.
Thanks, Debbie. That was great. That was a lot of information for sure. Makes me want to go back and look at my town's ERI. I think one of my personal favorite tools that are out there is NG Adapt, and looking at the municipal snapshot just to play around with it and see what's happening just even in my own town. So that's really great. We did have one question that popped up, and I would like to remind folks that feel free to ask questions if you're interested. Does the DEP have grants for doing ERIs?
Not that I know of. I've never come across that.
Yeah, either have I. Usually the DP doesn't have this, but if you're, if you're doing an update and you have EC members who are really comfortable with using GIS systems, that's always an option as well. Working with the consultant and commission members, definitely. Oh, and another one just dropped in here. Is it correct that if your town's ERI is not up to date, the town can apply for an open space stewardship grant? If you're talking about ANJAC's open space stewardship grant, that is not tied to the town's ERI. That is tied to if you are an active environmental commission. So those are not linked, just to put that out there. So that's great. Let me introduce Cynthia, and what we'll do then is she'll speak and keep popping up putting your questions in the Q&A, and Debbie and Cynthia will be sticking around to answer any more questions at the end. So let me just quickly introduce her before she starts speaking. So Cynthia Majon recently completed a 7-year term as co-chair of the City of Newark's Environmental Commission. She previously worked as environmental justice organizer at the Ironbound Community Corporation. It's a community-based organization in the East Ward of Newark, New Jersey, where the history of environment pollution goes back over a century. While serving on the Newark Environmental Commission, Cynthia helped achieve the passage of Newark's Environmental Justice Cumulative Impacts Ordinance, which is a mouthful, but it's the first municipal ordinance of its kind in the US and a precursor to New Jersey's statewide environmental justice law. She's a graduate of the Farm School NYC, which trains leaders in urban agriculture, while at ICC, she founded the first community garden in her section of Newark, which has now evolved into the landmark Down Mountain Farm. She currently serves on the steering committee for the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance and the New Jersey Latino Action Network, and is part of the community advisory group for the Passaic River Cleanup and Revitalization. And Cynthia, if she's not busy enough, she leads the work on geoengineering at the National Climate Justice Alliance. So welcome, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Debbie, I learned so much from your presentation. I really loved that. That was so useful. I didn't know most of that stuff when we started out. I kind of learned some of it on the way, and some of it I still hadn't known about. I'm just going to kind of tell our story about how we got an ERI in Newark. Newark got its first environmental commission in 2009, even though New Jersey has had a law on the books since the I think the 70s that you could have environmental commissions, but the conditions were not right in Newark. I remember reading about that, and I thought, we don't even come up to the standard where we can have one yet. And a lot of things got off, kind of kicked off in 2009 by several people who were forward thinking and saw that we could, when Mayor Booker became the mayor of Newark, we started coming into modern times, and the city before that was not even hooked up to internet, if you can kind of imagine that. And so we started getting the conditions where we could have an environmental commission, and very quickly they formed one. And when I look at that, I think the people who founded it were very much rooted in environmental justice. So from the outset, the idea of that work was to correct pollution and environmental problems in Newark, which are many. And I found our own experience in Newark was there were kind of two kinds of people on the commission: those who were like fighters for environmental justice, which I'm definitely in that camp. I came out of, doing that work, and then people who were really working to improve our urban planning and coordination in the city. And I think the Newark Environmental Commission is effective and will become even more effective because of that mixture of focuses on the commission. Newark, as I said, has a lot of pollution problems, and they're mostly focused on the East Ward, where a lot of people come from around the state and even other states to enjoy the restaurants and stuff, but they don't realize that that area is one of the cradles of industry in the United States. So we have soil pollution, water pollution going back, over a century. We also have real bad air pollution, the most of which comes from Port Newark Elizabeth and the diesel trucks that service those ports and some of the offshoot industries from that. So what is our wealth is also our poison. And some people have spent a lot of time studying that. And in Newark, we managed to link up with other communities around the country that were experiencing similar problems, especially from seaports. And there's now a national organization working to correct that. It's going to take time, but we got in right from the beginning. And so you'll kind of hear about that stuff going on. I think, again, when we talk about environmental justice, that is really referring to communities that are overburdened with environmental pollution. And there were often low-income communities and come with a whole set of problems and challenges. When we talk about the East Ward of Newark, it's got major highways, an incinerator that is serviced by 400 trucks per day. There's only 3 incinerators, garbage incinerators in New Jersey. They stopped them once they realized that they weren't helpful and that they're actually the enemy of recycling. But we've got one here. Camden has one. There's one in Rahway, right? They're a big problem. And we also have an increase in warehouse distribution centers, which means more trucks. The trucks that service the port, those are not Teamster drivers. They are old trucks owned and operated often by the drivers or small companies, and they are, for the most part, polluting, and old. So we have asthma rate of 27%, and 70% lower tree coverage just in the east ward of Newark than the rest of Newark, right? So there's these huge discrepancies right within our own city. And there's also demolition facilities and slaughterhouses, a lot of really outmoded activity that takes place here, all of which causes pollution. So people in the commission were really aware of that stuff. At the same time, we were trying to improve a lot of things like our stormwater management and other things like that. We also have the biggest Superfund site in the country. Superfund is the CERCLA law where the polluter has to pay if you can get them to do it. And that is the Passaic River. It's the most polluted river in the United States and the biggest Superfund site. It is polluted with dioxin, which they made Agent Orange in a factory on the banks of that river. And so a byproduct of that is dioxin, which is a very carcinogenic, cancer-producing substance. And it used to be all over the roads here. Kids actually played on the piles of dioxin. I talked to people who did that when they were children. So that we're you know, I love superlatives. We have some of the biggest challenges here, right? As I said, we finally got an environmental commission, which right from the get-go was trying to work with both sets of problems. And in 2016, after years of effort, Newark passed the first environmental justice and cumulative impacts ordinance in the country. And I was on the commission by then. I joined in 2014 when I was still working as an organizer at ICC. And once I left that job, I continued, and our peers elected their chairs. And so I'm really proud to say they elected me, and Mayor Baraka said, fine, I'm not going to go against that. He appointed me, and then we brought on a co-chair. And there's no law for that in New Jersey, but any big city needs co-chairs. We can't do this work alone. And I think I'd love to see that formalized, so the co-chairs are both recognized for the work that they do. Anyway, the ordinance was really important for us was the inclusion of that language, cumulative impacts, because that really refers to all the multiplying factors when you get so many layers of polluting activities. And people who don't like folks gaining empowerment for this work have often fought that terminology. So we were really proud of the fact that we had cumulative impacts included, and that has transferred into the statewide environmental justice law, which was passed a couple of years ago in New Jersey and has yet to enter into force. And we're watching that very closely because some industries have been trying to weaken that law, but we did it in Newark first. And the language was written by, very good friends of ours in the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance and so on. So even though we have all these challenges in New Jersey, we also have really great skilled people who are helping us get onto the cutting edge of fighting this. And I have no doubt in the long term that we're gonna win, right? So there were a couple things in the ordinance that really fell on the shoulders of this fledgling environmental commission. And I should say that there was a point when we didn't even have a sustainability office in Newark. It was closed due to some bad advice that was given to our mayor. So we actually went for a time where it was just the commission, and then we got it back. We got the sustainability office back, and we've been fortunate in having two excellent chief sustainability officers in a row, really progressive, really skilled people who have been key to the successes, or at least the struggles and efforts of the Environmental Commission. Once we had that, the EJ ordinance empowered and required the Environmental Commission to review, comment on, and make recommendations on permit requests that reach a certain threshold. If those companies needed an air permit from the DEP or the EPA or a solid waste permit, they had to, we as the commission had to review their permit requests. And we didn't have any format for doing that. We developed our own. And my computer's going to die. I'm going to run and get the power cord and plug it in. I'm so sorry. I just realized that's what happened.
Gotta love it. Well, I see that there are people are posting some more questions, so thank you. And when Cynthia's done, we'll talk about those. And hopefully she can find her cord.
Sorry, I can't believe it. Okay.
No worries.
Working at home, so not for a while. Couple of things. When we started doing, and I'm gonna try and pull up on the screen an example of one of these recommendation. They're actually a courtesy review. They're not binding by law, and yet we did many of them for permit requests, which we presented to the zoning board or the planning board. And I pretty much did them all. Other people on the commission weren't very interested in doing it. As I said, it wasn't their focus. I learned how to do it from our sustainability officer in the sense of developing a format. And I'm a writer, so I was able to kind of pull it off. But I have to say that after presenting on that before any of the boards, I would feel like I had a hangover the next day, because I mean, it always went, they never acted once on our recommendation. We never succeeded in blocking or stopping a single thing. However, especially those that we presented to the zoning board of variance are on record, right? So, I mean, we can show what we were trying to do and what we saw as problems. Again, how do I say this? Like, I think it is really an honor to be able to serve our city in this way. And I really want to say that to folks who are commissioners. I mean, it's really great to be able to do that. The downside is that, we're mostly working all day at other things to earn our living, looking after kids and whatnot. I would stay up all night writing these things. I mean, there were many, many all-nighters to do this. There was no support for it. And we never won, So I started complaining to the people who put the law together, and said, did you think, that it would lead to this? Because we haven't had any success and folks are getting all worn out writing these. However, we learned a lot, which I think there were certain things we were really looking at that were major areas of concern, and all of them are still, but some of the sources of pollution I mentioned to you. Is this business going to bring in more truck trips? Is there going to be trucks idling on the street? And that is one of our biggest problems. The biggest source of air pollution in Newark is from the diesel trucks that service the ports, and now those big warehouse distribution centers that are multiplying. Like, we fought hard when they raised the Bayonne Bridge because they were going to be able to bring in bigger ships with more containers, and that meant more trucks, and yet none of this stuff had been solved. And the amount of impervious surface, right? We've already got lower tree coverage in some wards than others. I think it's way lower again in this famous East Ward. And sometimes we would build in even, you've got to plant so many trees. Some of the companies would do that or promise to do that. But on the whole, it was very challenging, right? We even said that the facilities should, and this is going back some years, right? They should install infrastructure for charging for electric trucks, so that they wouldn't have to do it later, that like to kind of keep us on track, that this would happen. I'm going to see if I can pull up one of those, just an example so you can see this thing there it is. Let's see, share screen. Let's see if I can do it. No, I can't even find share screen. Never mind. I'm going to send some stuff to you guys, to Nandini, to share with you some slides and stuff that I have. And also an example of these evaluations we did of permit requests, which probably this feeds right into what I want to say about the ERI. Another stipulation of the environmental justice ordinance that Newark passed was that we were to produce, and it said specifically the Environmental Commission would produce an environmental resources inventory within 1 year of passing. I used to wake up in the middle of the night because we hadn't succeeded in doing that. And I thought, what if they find out we haven't, most people don't know this, and how are we going to do this? And maybe maybe we're outside the law. Maybe I can't even be issuing these evaluations, these courtesy reviews of the permit requests. We had no wherewithal for doing it. You know, again, we didn't know, Debbie, we didn't have money. You know, we just didn't know how we were going to do that. And I read the ANJAC paper on how to do an ERI, and I really liked it a lot, you know, but it kept saying that Highland Park was the kind of gold standard. And I used to live in Highland Park when I was at Rutgers. I thought, well, Highland Park versus Newark in terms of complexity, you know, that's a little different, right? Anyways, this went on, and eventually when Natalie Agosto Fillon became our Chief Sustainability Officer, and I learned about the work of the Victoria Foundation also, that they make grants only to Newark and so on. And we were finally able to get some funding. And then I did do a preliminary startup on an ERI with some graduate students, because I just kind of did, you know, I really didn't know how to navigate this. And one of them, we ended up using her maps, and then Natalie was able to hire some people to pull this off and finish up the ERI, which we have, and which is even hard copy a book, which is pretty wonderful, because you can just kind of thumb through this, you know, and it's I'd like to see it in all the libraries at least, you know, so folks could kind of pick that up and work with it. Anyway, once that kind of got rolling, we were able to get our ERI completed, and it was launched in 2021. Now, next step of this, like when we're talking about uses of ERI, our ERI in Newark is special because it has a bunch of stuff in it that you may not see everywhere else, you know, and it has some maps that talk about the effects of pollution on people. It not even saying it as explicitly as that, but I was just looking at it because I hadn't paid much attention to those sections. Like there's a mapping on amount of mental distress, so you can see, you know, pollution sources and overlay those maps on each other. Asthma, lead exposure risk, obesity rates, healthy food assets, high blood pressure risk, all kinds of, or literally those things are in our ERI, which, you know, really, in other words, talks about environmental health in very concrete terms for people. So I'm really proud of that. And I think I'm a beekeeper, so I would have loved to see number of beehives and maybe we can add that map, because I found out that in New York City, beekeeping became so popular that some areas are actually kind of tapped out in terms of resources for those bees. So I'd love to show that on a map. We didn't get around to it, but maybe we can at some point. And the other part is this onerous work we were doing, which probably, because I really know EJ and Newark, because I worked at that for a long time, knew what to look for, but your average person can't be expected to know that. The ERI now is linked to a questionnaire that permit applicants have to fill out, and it's going to streamline that process that we would do about, you know, when you had a permit, like how many trucks are already there? What is the impervious surface that's already there? What is the flood risk? What other polluting facilities are there, and so on. It's going to make it impossible for them to fudge, and it's going to hopefully really streamline that process so that you don't have to have 10 years in EJ before you can sort of understand how to evaluate this. I was really anxious to take it for a test drive, but something really strange also happened. We're not getting those kind of permit requests because Newark is on the verge of gentrification, and now they're just building residential, you know, which our ordinance does not cover that. We can only evaluate commercial and industrial projects. So I'm not sure what we should do about that, because not all building things are sustainable either, you know, the things that they want to do. But that is something I'm kind of struggling with, right? Because when it came up, I was just like, you know, I just kind of have to invent a project so I can run it through. But all of those things are included in our ERI, and I do want to thank Victoria Foundation, and others who supported us. So we have this biggest ERI in New Jersey. And I'll be really happy to answer people's questions. I'd love to.
Great. Thanks so much, Cynthia, for giving that background information. You guys have been definitely leaders and worked so hard to bring the whole country up to speed, because you had the nation's first EJ cumulative impact ordinance. So it took a lot of determination. I am just looking at the questions here. There's a question here. Many towns are facing lawsuits from builders who are pushing for new high density housing developments. Yeah, definitely. And the courts not take into consideration the impact of the environment, and acres of wood being completely cleared, and towns are forced to settle and change their zoning and master plan. What can we do about that? This is it's a very complicated question, and I'm glad it's being asked, because we're going to have actually a whole session just talking about land use as well. But Jen, do you want to just jump in and give a 30-second answer for now?
Yeah, tune in tomorrow at noon or watch the recording. It all comes down to proactive planning and zoning. If you're not planning for affordable housing, you're not planning to do the right thing by your teachers, your nonprofit workers, your hospital workers, those who have less means, then you're going to have to face a builder's remedy or a lawsuit. And so it really comes down to proactive planning rather than emergency knee-jerk planning.
And I think that builds on a bit of what Cynthia was sharing, the anticipation of what's coming next. You folks didn't anticipate Newark moving towards more residential and the gentrification, but when you go through this ERI process, it does force you to think things through, right? And consider different elements of what's coming up. And that's me. So Dan had a question. I'm sorry, Hildy had a question. What are the typical consulting costs for an ERI update? Do you want to answer that, Debbie?
I don't know for sure what other consultants charge, but I would estimate about 20,000.
That's for an update? I thought that would be more.
Oh, well, for an update, it's going to depend, because if you just need to do portions, then it could, like, I don't know, I wouldn't know how to estimate that, because it, it could vary from something small to completely redoing. Like an update that's, if a different consultant did their original ERI, like I still have to basically write a new ERI. So I can't really, reduce what I personally am charging. But if I was to update like one that I previously did, like I could then charge less. So it would vary. But I guess maybe a guideline would be less than like if a new one is 20,000, then less than 20,000 for an update. It's going to vary.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Question here: can preserved land ever become unpreserved?
I can take that. Yes, but it's going to cost you. So preserved land needs to, by and large, adhere to what we refer to as the Green Acres rules. And that is regardless of whether or not it is preserved with Green Acres funds. And that is because when a municipality signs an agreement to accept state funding on Green Acres, they agree to abide by those Green Acres rules. Now, if you want to never receive Green Acres funds again, I suppose you could flunk the rules, but you really don't want to do that. If you are going to unpreserve, if you will, open space land, that's called a diversion, and there are very strict requirements for a diversion. It has to be in a public good setting, which I have most frequently seen as either a hospital, a school, or expansion of a roadway. Now, we could argue over our drink of choice what if those are actual public good or not. But when that happens, you then the responsible entity, so the county, the municipality, needs to then preserve open space in excess of the open space that is being diverted from preserved open space to whatever that use is. So it's a multiple times you need to preserve land in excess of what's being taken, if you will.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Our last question for this afternoon is, beyond the pipeline example, what uses does the ERI have that's been reported by municipalities? And I think Cynthia gave a great example of the mental health impacts, and that can definitely be used by the municipalities to work on public health issues and pass stronger ordinances. So what's been your experience there?
Well, I mean, our ERI is really new. And what's really on top of my head right now is this, what we call a false solution to the climate crisis, which is this whole notion that we can capture CO2, carbon dioxide from different sources. And now they're looking for places to store that stuff. And I think Newark is being targeted. A long time ago, they wanted to do something like that in Linden, and people stopped it. So anytime I think things are going to get crazy, people are going to have to do a lot of educating on what this is and why it's a problem. But I think your ERI is super helpful for showing what's already there and building your case no matter what, and I think it's going to have to come into play if this is going to be turning into a reality. I was with a couple of people who were talking to our congressperson's staff last week about that. And a lot of that stuff is in 2 of the climate related new laws under the federal administration, and even the Congress people themselves don't know what that stuff means. So it's been my job to learn it, and I think we're going to be able to use our ERIs to help bolster those arguments. We've got to use all the tools we can get.
Got it. This last question dropped in, and then we'll close out. Hildy asked, Debbie, you said 18 months to develop an ERI, and how long does it typically take to get the first draft reviewed by the town for an ERI update? They're looking for a range, but I think, Debbie, you would agree, it just really depends on how aggressive the township is in getting the paperwork through and reviewing the document.
Yeah, and sometimes those preliminary steps take longer than you expect. Get a contract in place, and then when the consultant provides a draft, then the EC needs time to review it, and so there's some back and forth, so that takes time.
Got it. Okay, great. On that note, I'm going to wrap it up for this afternoon. Please join us again for tonight's session, which starts at 7 p.m. And thank you so much to Debbie and Cynthia. We really appreciate you and all your knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.